people to decide where the truth is.
Give government propaganda and the media spin doctors the flick. And check out Doin' Time for news, views and tunes on prison issues from Guantanamo Bay to Christmas Island to prisons and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doin' Time Show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. And this is Marissa, and Peter's here too, pushing buttons.
Hi.
And we're going to be doing two interviews today. The first one is going to be with Ian from Sydney, and he's from the Refugee Action Coalition. And we're going to be speaking about legislation clearly intended for doctors to bring asylum seekers and refugees to the mainland. We're going to discuss the very interesting and controversial medical bill that was basically ruined by the Liberal government. And now the Liberal government is reopening Christmas Island and flying six people up to 68, 70 kilometres there from Nauru before having to send them on to mainland Australia at enormous expense. And it shows that the government's content for human need. It's just disgusting. So there was actually a rally that happened at the State Library, and there were a number of speakers. And this particular rally, or snap action rather, was organised by the Refugee Action Collective. And we're going to be speaking with Ian about that and looking a bit around the background of asylum seekers and refugees. After that, we're going to be speaking with Brett Collins from Justice Action, and we'll speak to Brett about a number of issues. Hopefully he'll be able to speak about some of the work that Justice Action has been doing in regards to voting rights for prisoners. But first and foremost, we will speak to Brett because he was actually present at one of the days of the David Dungay inquest. An inquest has reopened into the death of David Dungay Jr., a 26-year-old Indigenous Dunguti man who basically died in custody. There was graphic footage. It was an 8-minute ordeal which happened at the inquest a couple of years ago, which began with officers from an immediate action team at Sydney's Long Bay Jail rushing Dungay's cell and restraining him face down on the bed. He was transferred to another cell where he was restrained again, injected with a powerful sedative, midazolam, and a few minutes later stopped breathing. And it was all over a packet of biscuits. So, yeah, we interviewed Litona, David's mother, 2 weeks ago on the 4th of February, and we spoke with her about David's death. She is also attending the inquest, so we'll speak to Brett Collins from Justice Action, where he will give an eyewitness account of the inquest. So I believe Peter has got some music for us.
Oh, yeah, this is River of Tears, Kev Carmody.
And you're back with the Doin' Time Show, and what a very appropriate song by Kev Carmody, River of Tears, really emphasising the ongoing genocide in this country. And we're actually speaking now with Ian from the Refugee Coalition. Hello, Ian. It's lovely to have you on the program.
Yeah, hi, Marissa. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, was that correct, that name, that title?
Yeah, Refugee Action Coalition. Yeah, I'm in Sydney. Yeah, affiliated with the Refugee Action Collective in Melbourne.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ian.
Yep.
For clarifying that. Now, I was just reading on air an action alert, and there was some. The Refugee Action Collective actually had a snap action on Saturday, and I'll just quickly quote from the media release before we launch into our interview. Medivac means Xmas is detention. What? Sorry, I had a mental block there.
That's all right.
What's Medivac mean?
Medivac is a term for medical evacuation. It's a shortening referring to the medical evacuation from people from Nauru and Manus. So it happens in two ways. Sometimes it's an emergency, and there's actually a care flight, an actual Medivac flight. But the bill that's been passed now refers to medical evacuation. So it's become a short version to talk about Medivacs from medical transfers from Nauru and Manus.
Thank you so much. I thought that was a typo on my Braille document. Refugee supporters rallied in central Melbourne on Saturday, 2nd of March, to demand that the federal government bring Medivac patients from Manus and Nauru to mainland Australia for treatment. Refugee Action Collective spokesperson Chris Breen said that the Morrison government is attempting to subvert the recent Medivac legislation by reopening the detention centre on Christmas Island and declaring that refugees and asylum seekers needing treatment would be taken there first. Can you tell us a little bit of background about this, Ian, and tell us a bit about the bill and why Christmas Island has been opened? I just don't get it.
No, well, yeah, we don't get it either, really, Marissa. The Medivac bill came about as amendments to part of the Migration Act bill, and what it referred to was the possibility of recommendations. Well, ultimately, that's what it's been passed now, so that on the recommendations of 2 treating doctors, people who require treatment or assessment, medical assessment in Australia, can be transferred on the basis of those 2 doctors' recommendations from Nauru and from Manus Island. That's been a short version. What it means is also a provision for family members who have been separated. So if someone has been medical brought already from Nauru or Manus to Australia, and if they've got direct family that remain on Manus or Nauru, then they can also, under this bill, be transferred to Australia to be with the family. So it's a family reunion aspect to the bill. But it was faced enormous resistance from the coalition. People might remember that they. I'm not sure what there's a word for it when people effectively, I can't think of it, when they gerrymander, they just, so it's Coy Bernardi, who just kept talking and using up the time last year to prevent the bill being going back to the House of Representatives. It's, it was supported by Labor, the Greens, and all the independents, Bob Katter. So it's the first bill for 90 years to actually get up against the sitting government. So it was carried 75 to 74 in the House of Reps, and it was a major defeat for the Morrison government. Now they're trying to resist it in every way possible, and so Morrison's first response to the carrying of legislation was to say everyone who is transferred from Nauru and Manus Island for medical treatment is now going to be placed, in Christmas Island. And even before the legislation was got royal assent, became law, Morrison had made a big song and dance about, reopening Christmas Island. They've now put out a notice, effectively intimidating people who are on Manus and Nauru, saying if you are medically transferred, we will detain you. And now the news today is that he's going to make a trip to Christmas Island to do a little bit more, grandstanding, saying that that's what they're going to do. And they are attempting to subvert the substance of the bill. Obviously, people who are sick, who do need treatment, do need assessment, are not going to get that on Christmas Island. Morrison is saying he will send them there simply because he can, and hopefully that he hopes to be seen as another anti-refugee strongman.
Yeah, well, it's I'm so happy that you were able to talk about that background. Now, Ian, with your phone, you sound great, you sound really clear, but there is a little bit of static there. Are you able to just, I don't know.
Yeah, okay, I'll try and move somewhere.
That's a little bit better.
A little bit better. Maybe I was yelling a bit closer to the microphone.
No, you're doing a fantastic job. You're coming across loud and clear. It's just
okay.
That's better.
Is it? Okay.
So, Ian, with the bill, and you've explained it really well, with the bill, is it actually, has it been watered down, do you think, by Labor putting in the amendments? What do you think happened there?
Well, the amendments were unnecessary. That's certainly true. But I don't think it's been substantially watered down. And I think you can see that by the government's response. They've responded hysterically by reopening Christmas Island. But the proof of the pudding is going to be in the eating. I think the problem for the campaign is that they were just unnecessary concessions, and it seemed to indicate again, kind of Labor's willingness to make concessions to the government's anti-refugee policy on the basis of, security considerations or criminality considerations or all the kinds of things which the government often raises around issues of refugees, rather than seeing it, as a refugee, as a human rights issue. They want to put it in terms of national security and, and border protection. So there were some unnecessary concessions. That's true. But I don't think it's watered it down too much, more than we would like, obviously.
It's a pretty crude attempt by the Liberal government to drum up a racist scare campaign, isn't it, in the run-up to the election in May? And I'm wondering if Labor actually put in those amendments because of that scare campaign.
Well, obviously, there's certainly an element of that. They're very worried that that is how the government is going to respond to the fact that Labor has voted with the Greens and the Independents to carry this legislation against the government. Like, it's the first time for many years that we've seen Labor willing to stand up to the coalition over refugee legislation, refugee policy in any way. I think the more revealing thing, is the government's response. Like, they simply cannot believe, one, that Labor has actually done it, has stood up to them, and secondly, that their scare campaign, there's no sign that their scare campaign is actually working, which I think helps explain their hysteria and disarray, really. They, I think, firmly believe, like they did in the Victorian elections, that you just had to talk about African gangs and you were going to guarantee a state government win for the Liberals in Victoria. And federally, Morrison and Dutton just think you've got to talk about refugees and it's a sure winner, for the coalition. I think we've seen very clearly that it's not. Hopefully that is an encouragement to Labor to say that we do not need and shouldn't, keep making concessions in any way, to the Liberals' arguments about refugees, and that it's possible for a human rights policy to actually get a hearing in the Australian public. That it's not the electoral winner that the coalition has relied on, and most of the media has also talked about the Tampa effect. The Australian was very quick to talk about Scott Morrison's Tampa moment, but the recent polls have indicated that it's no such thing, and he's still a long, long way behind in the polls in spite of the scaremongering.
Look, this government is so transparent. Anybody can see what's going on.
Yes, except them. Did
you see Insiders on Sunday?
I didn't. No.
They were talking about the healthcare system, and they showed a couple of clips from the week, and the government, the Liberal government the Morrison government keeps saying that the healthcare system will be run down because of refugees having been flown to the mainland. Isn't that shocking? Like, I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah. No, I think that, and that's also like indicative of where they find themselves. Like they are really scraping the bottom of the barrel. They've always been prepared to do that. I mean, Dutton's talk about the South African farmers or the African gangs, and now talking about refugees taking the places of Australians, that Australians won't forgive refugees if they're taking their place. They conveniently forget that this government, the Morrison government, has now transferred almost 900 people from Nauru and Manus Island. But apparently, the sick people who were coming from Nauru, around Christmas time, they weren't taking anybody's place. That was just fine. It's fine to talk about, and they sometimes even amazingly brag about getting the children off Nauru, the kids who needed medical attention. Apparently that's okay, but if they're adults who need medical attention, well, there's no sympathy, whatsoever, and we're going to try and scapegoat and denigrate those people, and it is despicable, but I think it's become very typical kind of response to scapegoat minorities, try and use the media as much as they can to pitch refugee rights against the rights of many people. But I think most people understand that if government cuts, if there are queues in hospitals, if people can't get treatment, it's certainly not because of refugees before or after the Medivac bill.
And, basically, if it's the government that's running down the healthcare system, because if Manus and Nauru were shut down, there'd be a lot of money saved and it could be put into the healthcare system.
Yeah, look, the madness of the thing too, Marissa, is if they'd never been sent there, then they wouldn't need some of the health care that they actually need. The government has made them sick. The government has robbed them of their mental health. Has denied treatment for for even issues like breast lumps, which could have been dealt with here in Australia. Perhaps they could have been assessed, and they wouldn't be, sort of major health, considerations. But by leaving people without treatment for, over 5 years in some cases, that's not what we've got anymore. We've got, major health problems, and they need to be treated. But of course, it's not at anybody's expense at all. And the doctors themselves have made that point. There's plenty of capacity in the public health system to absorb the small numbers of people that actually do need, that treatment. But it's right to make the point. They need that treatment because it has denied them treatment for the last 5+ years.
So in reality, Ian, is it true to say then, so the bill can't happen now? So does that mean they're just if they reopen Christmas Island, they're just going to be transferred from one remote island to the other and they won't be able to go to Australia?
Look, the bill is very clear that people have to be transferred from Nauru for medical treatment. I think the government has tried to put Christmas Island in as kind of the spoke in the Medivac wheel. But it's also clear that if people are transferred and do not get the medical treatment, the fact is that on Christmas Island they will be subject to Australian law, and there certainly, it's already been made clear, if they don't get treatment or the government tries to delay that treatment, there will be legal action, as there had to be last year in the federal court to get orders on the Australian government to provide medical treatment. In this case, it will be because it's not available on Christmas Island. So the government's opened itself as they think they're going to use Christmas Island now to warehouse people. They're mistaken. They're mistaken because there will be an absolute, massive outcry against trying to substitute Christmas Island for Nauru, or Manus, and there will be an outcry because it will be a obvious attempt to subvert the need for medical treatment of the people who are on Manus and Nauru, and there certainly will be legal action. So I think it's a fair bit of political grandstanding, by Moss. We're going to reopen Christmas Island because we can. We're going to, use Christmas Island as another little part of our, electoral platform. Where the government that's been taking the strong arm positions against refugees. But as I said, the promising thing is that there's no indication at all that response has gained them, any political support at all. And just like the rally in Victoria on Saturday, where everywhere around the country is now building for major refugee rallies on April the 14th, Sunday, Palm Sunday, not very far away now, where we're going to make it as big as we possibly can to say bring everyone from Manus and Nauru to Australia. We're going to close all the detention centres. That means Manus, Nauru, and Christmas Island now.
Thank you so much, Ian. I'm in a concluding comment here, and it's probably going to... I want to apologise if I'm going to be offending any listeners here who are Catholics, but, you hear John Howard and Tony Abbott going on about the priest Powell and, making out like he's such a mate of theirs and how Powell, basically watering down the victim statements of the pedophilia in the Catholic Church. And yet, you hear the Morrison government saying, oh, yes, but there's going to be pedophiles coming to Australia.
Yeah.
Seriously.
With much less evidence.
Sorry? With
much less evidence that there are pedophiles coming from Nauru or Manus to Australia than the very clear evidence that the Royal Commission has produced that where they exist in the church and other places in Australia.
I mean, seriously, I had to mention that. And I'm not here to attack. Everybody has a right and freedom of religion. I'm not here to attack that. I'm just saying it's double standards and it's absolutely deplorable. There's many people on that list of character references for Cardinal Powell are a list of people who've taken very, very strong anti-refugee positions. So it's a lot of hypocrisy around at the moment. Ian, thank you so much for coming onto the program. Are there any concluding comments that you'd like to make before we end our interview?
I think I've made my call to support the rallies. I think now we've seen a very big breakthrough as far as the movement is concerned. The kids are now off Nauru. I think there's momentum now to get everybody off Nauru. In Manus Island, we need to keep that momentum up. We need to support the rallies that are recalled, and we need to make Palm Sunday rallies across the country the biggest they've been.
When is it again? 14th of April?
14th of April, 2 o'clock. It's outside the State Library in Victoria, Swanston Street. 2 o'clock, April 14th.
Ian, thank you very much for that. Thanks a lot.
Good on you. Thank you, Marissa. Bye-bye.
Take care. And that was Ian from the Refugee Action Coalition from Sydney. And he was speaking about asylum seekers and refugees and the medical crisis that they are facing. Just to also say to listeners that Christmas Island has only 6 hospital beds and locals already have to fly to the mainland for a range of operations and for childbirth. So go figure. It's approximately 4:22 and we're going to be speaking shortly with Brett Collins from Justice Action, who's going to be reporting from the inquest that's been reopened for David Dungay Jr.
Help 3CR support the rights of Indigenous Australians.
They mean to save our culture and save our dreams, our footprints, dreams, our songline, and keep our culture going strong.
Of course, a lot of the Aboriginals, having been stolen, were put into state care, and also others
recognition of what our people have been through in the last 200 years, the recognition of our culture in the last 40,000 years, and the recognition of where we are heading into the future.
Welcome to Survival Day, Invasion Day. 223 years ago, the white man landed on our shores.
Subscribe to 3CR and help keep Indigenous voices on air. Call us on 94198377 or visit 3cr.org.au.
And you're back with the Doing Time show, and we're speaking now with Brett Collins from Justice Action, and Peter's joining me in the studio as well. Hello, Brett. Welcome to the program.
Yes, can I start? Good
now,
to hear you.
You might. It's lovely to hear from you.
I'm just my phone now, just like I was in.
Yeah,
Got
that's
you
it.
there?
Oh,
Excellent.
beautiful.
Okay.
You're a legend, Brett. Now, now, Brett, we was discussing over the phone. Now, you wanted today to talk about the topic of David Dungay Jr. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. It's an absolutely tragic and amazing case of this young Aboriginal man who died in custody in Long Bay, and the inquest has been running 2 weeks already, and today it began again here in Sydney.
Were you there at the inquest?
Yes, I was. I was there. There would have been a team of, I'd say probably 20 members of the family who'd come down as well. And there were a number of other people, including there was the SBS was there, and so was the National Indigenous Television. So there was a lot of interest in the inquest, and there were actually 13 lawyers there, defending. Well, not all defending David, unfortunately, but they were there to defend their own interests. They were corrective services. They're enforced with the Crown Solicitor there.
Corrective services were there, were they?
Yeah, they had, I'd say, 13 lawyers in total. So there was, it just gives you a sense of how much interest there was.
So this says inquest has reopened, hasn't it?
That's right. No, the earlier part of the inquest happened in July, August last year, and it went for 2 weeks.
Yes.
So it was quite horrendous. They had he actually died. David died in Long Bay in the prison hospital on December 29th in 2015. So it's taken 3 years to come to this stage. But the grossness of the behaviour of both prison guards and also nurses has been really shown very graphically by a closed-circuit television recordings, a video recording, where David was told to stop eating a packet of biscuits, and because he refused to stop eating them, they decided to do a cell extraction on him, and as a result of that, and injecting him with this medication, he died. He ended up dying.
So there was basically people that didn't. The officers were not trained to deal with any of that.
Yeah, look, it doesn't come down to training, to be honest, about this matter. It comes down to just showing some it comes
some
down
sympathy.
to, showing some just general humanity to the man. Now, he had six guards who were holding him down on his stomach.
Disgusting.
So in his stomach, and they had, and they then took his pants down and then injected him in the buttocks. And they had nursing staff, 4 other guards. There were 6 guards holding him down. 4 other guards were looking on, right? And while this was happening, he called out 12 times. He called 12 times. I can't breathe, right? And they said, well, you can talk, you can breathe, right? And he lost consciousness. And then that's something they realised that he actually had lost consciousness, and he had no way of getting air back in his lungs. Then they waited several minutes before they began CPR, and then he went into cardiac arrest. It took a long period before they understood that he was in the process of dying, and people just didn't take responsibility.
Not only do they not take responsibility, but we were talking to his mother on the show a couple of weeks ago. We were talking to Latona. And what I meant by training was that Latona had mentioned to us, and indeed others who've been interviewed on this show about David mentioned that the officers and indeed the medical staff were not equipped to put him in the right position so that he wouldn't die.
Well, that's right. Well, that's all absolutely. And the other thing, probably even worse than that, is there was no reason at all for them to do a cell extraction. And one of the nurses today was giving evidence, and she said that she had been told by the doctor, and she had carried the information from the doctor, that there was no reason for them to go and do a cell extraction. They could leave them alone. And she actually gave evidence today, and she said that she'd spoken to a group of officers, and she identified 2 of them as with code names, as code name Officer E and Officer F, who she spoke with directly, who were in that group, and who then proceeded after that to be involved in the cell extraction, and then held him down and forced the air out of him and killed him. Right. So it's what we had today was evidence to say that the doctor had passed the information to the nurse. There was no urgency at all. They could have left him where he was, but instead they moved in on him and killed him.
It's terrible, and there really is a failure of duty of care, really. Latona was distraught when she was speaking to us.
Well, look, I think what came out of it, and what's come out of it frequently is, and looking at the graphic, the actual video of what actually happened, and these things are actually now we've deliberately made a link across to the videos on our website, so people who have access to the website can actually see. There's the Guardian ran a series of podcasts and with the videos in there. And so what you see is like really gross behaviour. People just not caring, and when you've got 6 guards around a single man, like pressing on his chest, and you've got another 4 guards outside looking on, you've got overwhelming force there. Not to show him compassion is such a bad thing.
Absolutely. And where has this inquest actually taken place? Is this the first day, Brett?
Well, look, the first 2 weeks of the inquest happened in the centre of the city, in the Downing Centre. But today it's taken out to Lidcombe, where there's a new centre out there, and there would have been, I'd say, 70 people who were listening to the evidence. As I say, there were 13 lawyers. I mean, a lot of lawyers are there for not for the interests of David Dungay. They're there for to defend the prison officers, like their guards involved, and also corrective services and justice health, and the nurses separately have their own barrister. So they have a lot of people who are focusing on the death and custody of David Dungay. But from the questions that are being asked, it's clear that there will be some very significant changes as a result of what happened to David.
What do you mean by significant changes, in your view?
Well, look, one of the most important things was that when the nurse and the prison officers were asked is there any protocol for to have somebody in there, somebody who is a friend of David who could talk to him, an Aboriginal liaison officer, another peer mentor from inside the prison? So we're talking now about other prisoners who are respected by others, who are delegated to the task, trained to assist with other prisoners. And the question was, had they been asked to intervene? Because, he's not as though he can't talk. David Dungay was a lucid, handsome, smart, young Aboriginal man, right? And he was quite capable of explaining, why he was resisting giving back the biscuits, and he could have been talked to just like any other human being.
Exactly.
And so what was required was whether he needed to have a friend there, someone to say that back off, leave him alone. What's wrong with him? Why shouldn't he eat the biscuit? And that conversation needed to happen. But because he was by himself, nobody needed to talk to him. They just thought they could run in on him and impose their will, regardless of what he wanted to do, first thing, and regardless of what the medical support team, including the doctor, felt was important. They just wanted to say, look, we told you to do something, and you'll just do it. And here it is. And if you act like an uppity Aboriginal boy, we'll show you his boss. And that's exactly what they did.
And this is the first day, like not the first day, but this is like they had the inquest last year, but this is the continuation of it.
This is the first day they resumed hearing. It's been projected for another 5 days this week. Good. And there's the barristers are there. We're now looking at what are the recommendations that should come out of the inquest. So we're trying to work through what we would hope the coroner would say. And a number of things, obviously, and some of them he should have had access to some external support, wherever that was. He needed to have some friends. I needed the family to be there. The family could easily have been there from a phone to his mother or to other members of the family, who could have then persuaded him to take a different approach than he had, and could have persuaded the guards to have had a different response to him than they had. So to move in the way they did, with urgency, as though it was a crisis matter, just was not true. It needed to be handled delicately and with respect to him, and that clearly didn't happen. And as a result, he was killed. Another
Aboriginal death in custody.
Absolutely, and what we're hoping this time is that all the lessons of the Royal Commission to Aboriginal Deaths in Custody, they will come out properly. And so we're doing an analysis now about what were the recommendations that should have made the difference, and what has happened to those recommendations, and what has the New South Wales government done to ensure that they have been carried into action.
And who was presiding over the inquest today, Brett?
Sorry, who was what again? Who
was anyone who was actually in charge of the inquest?
Look, we had a team of 3 there, so 4 actually, who are reporting on it. So they've actually got notes, and at the end of the hearing, which would have ended by now, they're all going to pay their notes. It'll go to a scribe, who will then put together a report of today's events. And then for the next, in fact, over this whole week, we'll have someone there who'll be writing a report and sharing that report out on social media, so everyone will be aware of that. What has been happening. Yes.
Well, it's not lovely, but it's good that they're sharing it. So Brett, what was your? I mean, you saw the evidence. They showed the video footage, did they?
Yes, they
today?
Did. No, we didn't see the video today. It was shown on the previous 2 weeks of hearings.
Yeah.
And the video, that video footage is available if you come up on the Justice Action website. There's a link there. If you go to the David Dungay, it says the death of David Dungay Jr. Up on our website, you'll find the links across to all the videos. So there's a very significant series of links that come in through The Guardian, actually, who's been watching very closely what has happened to David.
Indeed, and this particular footage is very graphic, and it's an 8-minute ordeal which led to David Dungay's death.
Yes, absolutely shocking, actually, absolutely shocking.
Brett, thank you so much for reporting on the inquest. We have been, the Do and Time show always looks for people that can report live from an inquest into
Wonderful.
a death in custody. And in fact, It's terribly important. Just before you go, though, can you just give us a little bit of an update about what Justice Action is doing?
Yes, Marissa. Well, look, we've had a team today, probably a team of, I think, 22, 23 people here, have been running hard on a number of things. One of the things we're doing, apart from working on the inquest, is we're preparing for both the federal and the New South Wales state election. So the federal election is only a matter of a few weeks away. So we're putting together a special edition of the newspaper, Just Us, and which will be going out to every person around Australia, and also into all the locked hospitals, the psychiatric hospitals as well. Every major political party has prepared statements. So it's right from the Labor and Liberal Greens right across to Socialist Alliance, and I think even the Pauline Hanson party has got a statement of some sort in there. So it's intended that everybody should have a chance to see what the parties have to say to prisoners, to people in prison and hospitals, and our focus particularly is on the education issue, because that's really a bit of a ladder up for people who have too much time on their hands and a chance to use it. So that's what the newspaper is about. And the other thing we're doing is we're also ensuring that the right to be enrolled actually means something. So we actually have been out to every state and territory and chasing the electoral commissions and the Federal Electoral Commission, and also all the commissioners, so the commissioners in charge of prisons. And by now, we would expect that there'd be posters up in the jails about how do you go about enrolling to vote. We were told that's happening now. So if it's not happening, any of the people in prison haven't seen the posters, now's the time to complain. Where are our posters about enrolling to vote? How do we go about doing so?
So prisoners are now allowed to enrol to vote?
Absolutely. In fact, they are entitled to, and there's an obligation on the prison authorities and the hospital authorities to ensure that they can.
Just in New South Wales.
They write to the Electoral Commission. They can get a postal vote, and they're entitled to then the same rights as does anybody else in the general community. So it means they have, if you, for example, on remand, total rights, everything, all rights. And if you're serving less than 3 years, that's the difference. Less than 3 years or less, then you can vote too. So it means most of the people inside prisons can vote, and everyone inside the hospitals can vote. And it's a nice chance to be engaged in the process. They try to exclude our community. Well, here we are included by law, and it forces all the authorities who are locking people up to respect that right. So we encourage everyone to enrol to vote and have their say and be engaged and be heard.
This is in the whole of Australia, Brett?
It is right over Australia. So we've actually all 8 jurisdictions. We've made contact with every one of them, and we had from all the prisons commissions. They all agreed that they are doing it at the moment. They say they are, but are they? That's the question. So definitely, the audience, they know on the ground what's actually really happening. So if they find there aren't posters up about the right to vote and enrolling to vote, if there's no information there, they should ask, how do we enrol to vote? Right? Come on, you have an obligation to ensure we know how to enrol to vote. That's the question they should be asking.
I'm just really glad that that 3CR Doing Time show has been able to shine a spotlight on that. And I believe you did an interview with Peter about this some weeks ago now, but it's always good to keep this issue alive, Brett. Now, just before, I know I'm kind of keeping you here a bit longer, but there's a lot to talk about. Just getting back to David Dungay, what is Justice Action's position, if you like, and what's the work that Justice Action is doing in regards to this particular death in custody?
Well, look, the most important thing is we're actually staying close and making sure that all the history of people who've died in similar situations to David, that history comes in. So it's no good for this to be looked at in isolation and act as though this is the first Aboriginal death in custody. It is not. There was a Royal Commission about this. There's been a continual series of deaths in custody where individuals have been isolated inside cells and been brutalised by the guards and by Justice Health, or they've actually even taken their own lives. So all those situations are ones which have lessons that must be accepted by the guards and by the authorities. Now, they have been ignored. They've been treated with contempt. And so the David Dungay case highlights how things must change and how people inside prison must have a right of hope, a word of hope, a word of respect, and that the health department, right, so the health department, whether it's the nurses, whether it's the doctors, that they have a special obligation to make sure that the life and safety of the people inside prison is protected.
Indeed, and it really is appalling, as you said before, that the recommendations of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody have not been upheld.
Well, that's right. And in fact, that analysis we're doing right now, and we'll see exactly what is the call, how many have been accepted, what difference would it have made to the way that they treated David Dungay. Would he be alive today if the New South Wales government had properly implemented those recommendations?
And indeed, according to Guardian Australia investigation, it finds that 56% were on remand and died. Like just generally speaking, with the deaths in custody statistics, while fleeing police or during arrest, or in protective custody.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's a whole level there of disrespect to people in that situation. Really, you have a police force armed and excited young, mostly young men and women with a gun. The temptation is to use it, and that's what's been happening. There's been gross violence by the officers of the state who are intended there to protect the community and protect everyone's lives. And so they shouldn't feel that they have a moral high ground to take out the gun and fire or to kill people who are vulnerably in a cell. So they're the sort of things that needs really careful monitoring. When you arm certain people in the community and give them a badge and call them police, it doesn't mean they have a permission to do whatever they want and to force their will and take lives of other people. And that's what is actually happening. And it's everyone's duty to make sure it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's so bad, Brett. I mean, with I'm just having a look at this article from The Guardian. Most of the Indigenous people who had not been yet charged were suspected of non-indictable offences, looking at public intoxication and evading police.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. No, the imbalance of power is clearly expressed in the way the Aboriginal people are being treated. And of course, if you look at the statistics of who's in the juvenile justice who are the juvenile justice detainees, you've got an amazing percentage of people across Australia who are Aboriginal youths are currently inside custody. And that suggests that in the future we'll have even a higher density of Aboriginal imprisonment and, of course, deaths in custody.
Yeah, and before we conclude, also just to say to listeners that one of the Aboriginal deaths in custody recently, we need to stand in solidarity also with the family of Tanya Day, and she's in Victoria. Tanya Day died in police custody because they apprehended her while she was allegedly drunk on a train,
Wow.
And indeed,
asleep.
Yeah, she was asleep, and she died in suspicious circumstances. And in her daughters, Belinda Stevens and April Watson, will be on the speakers platform at the International Women's Day rally this year in Victoria.
Okay, very important. And that's obviously this is a national problem, any international problem. Actually, it has to be fought at all levels. And so it's great that we're getting the focus through inquests such as David Dungay's and of course high level deaths such as the one you mentioned.
Brett, thank you so much for coming onto the program. Can you just tell us the Justice Action website, please?
Yes, absolutely. Well, so Justice Action's website is, if you go www.justiceaction.org.au. So www.justiceaction.org.au, and you come through to us, and we're happy to field questions and things come off there, and if we can contribute to the situation, we certainly will.
Thank you very much, Brett. As always, it's been great talking with you, and we'll have you back for your regular update in a month or two.
Lovely. Okay, thank you so much, Marcia.
Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
And you just heard an interview with Brett Collins from Justice Action. You just heard an interview with Brett Collins from Justice Action, and he was speaking to us about the inquest of David Dungay. He was reporting as a direct, because he was there live. And we spoke as well about other deaths in custody as well. It's approximately 4:51